The first time my father hit me, I was 6 years old, and the worst part wasn't the pain. It was that my mother watched. She stood in the kitchen doorway, arms folded tightly across her chest, her eyes fixed on the floor like the pattern of the old linoleum tiles was suddenly the most fascinating thing in the world. Not once did she look at me. Not once did she say my name. That night I learned something no child should ever have to understand. Silence protects monsters. My name is Daniel Hayes. For 18 years, my father ruled our house like a king who believed fear was the only language worth speaking. Outside our home, he was respected, admired, even loved. But inside the walls of our house, he was something else entirely. To the world. My father was Detective Michael Hayes, a decorated officer known for his bravery, the kind of man who rescued people from burning cars. The kind who chased criminals through dark alleys and came home with stories that made neighbors shake their heads in admiration. People called him a hero. Community events. Mothers pointed him out to their children and said things like, "See that man? That's what a real protector looks like." I used to hear those words and feel something twist inside my chest, because the man they applauded was not the man who lived behind our front door. At home, my father had rules. Lots of them. Rules about homework, rules about chores, rules about posture at the dinner table, rules about tone of voice. Rules about when I could speak and when I had to stay silent. If I forgot one, the belt came off. If I questioned one, the shouting began. And if I ever cried, things got worse. Real men don't cry. He would growl while gripping my collar hard enough to make breathing difficult. I learned very quickly that tears were gasoline to his fire. So eventually, I stopped crying. My mother never stopped him. Not once. Sometimes, after he left the room, she would come to me quietly. She'd place a cold washcloth on my bruises and whisper soft excuses. "Your father just has a temper, or he works very hard. He's under a lot of stress." Or the one she used most often, "Just try not to upset him." Her voice always carried the quiet guilt of someone who knew the truth, but didn't have the courage to face it. But excuses don't protect children. They protect abusers. School became my sanctuary. Not because I loved learning, but because teachers didn't hit you for breathing wrong. At school, mistakes meant correction. At home, mistakes meant punishment. There's a difference. A huge one. I stayed late whenever I could. Library. After school clubs, basketball, practice, even cleaning classrooms for extra credit. Anywhere that meant I didn't have to walk through the front door before sunset. Because evenings were when my father usually came home. And evenings were unpredictable. By the time I was 14, I had mastered survival. Stay quiet, stay invisible, stay out of his way. I learned to read the sound of his footsteps. Heavy footsteps meant anger. Slow footsteps meant alcohol. Fast footsteps meant something had gone wrong at work. Each one required a different strategy. Hide. Disappear. Stay silent. But violence doesn't need a reason. Sometimes it just needs a bad day. One night he came home drunk after losing a case at work. I knew the moment the door slammed. The house shook so hard a picture frame fell off the wall in the hallway. I was doing homework at the kitchen table. My mother was washing dishes. The air instantly felt heavier. Like a thunderstorm had just rolled inside. He walked into the kitchen and dropped his keys on the counter. The metal clatter echoed through the room. His eyes landed on my report card sitting beside my notebook. He picked it up slowly. I stopped breathing. "What's this?" he asked. His voice was calm. Too calm. The dangerous kind. "A report card?" I said quietly. I already knew the mistake. There was one B on it. Just one. Chemistry. Every other grade was an A. But perfection was the only thing my father accepted. The slap came before I could say another word. My chair tipped backward as my head slammed against the floor. For a moment, I saw nothing but white flashes. The taste of blood filled my mouth. "You think this is acceptable?" he shouted. He grabbed my shirt and pulled me upright. My mother stood only 3 feet away. Her hands were still in the sink. She didn't move. "I work 16 hours a day to give you opportunities," he yelled. Another hit, you embarrass me with this garbage? Another hit, I curled into a ball, waiting for it to end. Storms always burn themselves out eventually. That's the only comfort in surviving them. Later that night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. My ribs hurt. My cheek was swollen. But the pain wasn't what kept me awake. It was a realization, slowly growing in my chest. I wasn't safe, and no one was coming to help. That night, I made a promise to myself, a quiet one, a dangerous one. One day, the world will know the truth. Years passed. Bruises faded, but memories don't. They sit quietly in the dark corners of your mind. Waiting. When I turned 18, I left. No big argument. No dramatic confrontation. Just a duffel bag. A bus ticket. And a silent goodbye. My mother stood in the hallway while I packed. She watched me fold my clothes into the bag. Tears streamed down her face, but she still didn't stop me. Please don't hate us, she whispered. Those 4 words felt heavier than everything else in the room, but I didn't answer because hate wasn't the right word. What I felt was emptiness. I walked out of the house that morning without looking back, for the first time in my life. The air felt lighter. The next few years weren't easy. Freedom really is. I worked night shifts stocking shelves at grocery stores. During the day I attended community college. My apartment was small enough that you could stand in the kitchen and touch the couch, but it was quiet. Safe. And no one there raised their voice. Therapy helped. First, I hated it. Talking about the past felt like reopening wounds. But slowly I started understanding something important. What happened to me wasn't normal. It wasn't discipline. It wasn't parenting. It was abuse. Naming something gives it power, but it also takes away its ability to hide. I rarely thought about my father anymore. Or at least I tried not to. Until one afternoon when everything changed. I was eating lunch in a diner when I saw his face on the television above the counter. The news anchor was smiling proudly. Behind her was a large photo of him wearing his police uniform. The headline read, Detective Michael Hayes to receive Lifetime Hero Award for 25 years of service. My stomach twisted. They called him a protector, a role model, a pillar of the community. The broadcast showed footage of him shaking hands with city officials, rescuing accident victims, standing beside grateful families. Then I noticed something else. At the bottom of the screen was a line of text. Family members will be invited on stage to speak during the ceremony. Family. My hands started shaking. Because suddenly something clicked inside my head. The truth had a stage, and the entire city would be watching. A week later, a gold envelope arrived in my mailbox. My father's handwriting was unmistakable. Even after years, I recognized it instantly. Inside the envelope was a single card. No letter. No explanation. Just 2 words written in blue ink. Be there. It wasn't an invitation. It was a command. The same type he'd given my entire childhood, but this time, I wasn't a scared little boy. I was a grown man carrying 18 years of silence, and silence, when it finally breaks, can sound like thunder. I stared at the card for a long time. Then I did something I never thought I would. IRSVPD, yes. The night of the ceremony arrived faster than I expected. The city's Grand Civic Hall was packed out. Hundreds of people filled the room. Police officers in dress uniforms, city officials, journalists, neighbors, old friends. Everyone dressed in suits and gowns. Everyone smiling. Everyone ready to celebrate a hero. My father stood in the center of the room, surrounded by people shaking his hand. He looked proud, confident, untouchable, the same man the world had always seen. When he spotted me across the room, his eyes narrowed slightly. Not happy, not angry. Just calculating, like he was measuring a threat. Then I saw my mother standing near the back of the hall. She looked older, smaller, her hair had more gray than I remembered. When our eyes met, tears filled hers instantly, but she didn't walk toward me. Maybe she knew. Maybe she was afraid of what I might say. The ceremony began. Speeches filled the room. Stories, About bravery, about honor, about sacrifice. Each word felt like sandpaper, scraping against the truth in my chest. Finally, the mayor stepped forward to the microphone. And now, he announced with a smile, Detective Hayes' son would like to say a few words. The spotlight turned toward me. The audience clapped politely. They expected pride. Gratitude. A loving tribute. I stood. Slowly. My heart pounded harder with every step toward the stage. But something strange happened when I reached the podium. The fear I expected was gone. In its place was something else. 18 years of silence, ready to finally speak. I looked out at the crowd. Hundreds of faces, staring back. All believing the same lie. Then I looked at my father. He was smiling, but his eyes carried a warning. I knew too well. I took a breath and leaned toward the microphone. Most of you know my father as a hero. The crowd nodded. Some even clapped. Then I said the words that would change everything. Tonight, you're finally going to meet the man I grew up with. The applause stopped instantly. My father's smile disappeared, and that's when the real ceremony began. The applause died so suddenly it felt like someone had pulled the air out of the room. Hundreds of people sat frozen in their chairs, staring at me like they weren't sure they had heard me correctly. My father's smile disappeared, just like that. 1 second, he looked like the proud hero of the night. The next, like a man realizing the stage beneath his feet had turned into thin ice. I could see it in his eyes. Recognition. Fear. And something else. Anger. I tightened my grip on the podium, feeling the cool wood beneath my palms. The room smelled faintly of expensive cologne and polished floors. Crystal chandeliers glowed above us, throwing soft light across the crowd of police officers, city officials, reporters, and neighbors. Everyone had come here to celebrate a hero, but heroes aren't supposed to have secrets, and secrets have a strange way of surfacing when the lights are brightest. Most of you know my father as a hero? I repeated slowly. My voice echoed through the large hall. He saved people. I gestured toward the large screen behind the stage where slideshow of his achievements had been playing moments earlier. Rescued victims from car crashes. Heads in the audience nodded. Pulled families out of burning homes. More nods. He's been called brave, honorable, a protector. A few people clapped politely again, unsure whether the speech had returned to normal. But then I said the sentence that changed everything. But the man who protects strangers? I paused. Didn't protect his own son. A ripple of confusion spread across the room. Whispers began moving from row to row like wind across tall grass. What did he say? That can't be right. Is this part of the speech? I could hear the disbelief. People wanted this moment to be a misunderstanding. Joke. Anything but the truth. My father leaned forward in his chair, his eyes locked onto mine. That same look he had given me 100 times growing up. The warning look. The one that said you're about to regret this. But something had changed. Since those days, the fear that used to freeze me was gone. I took a slow breath. For 18 years, I said clearly, my father beat me. The room erupted in gasps. Someone near the front actually said, "Oh my God," out loud. Glass clinked somewhere as someone accidentally knocked their drink against the table. The mayor shifted uncomfortably beside the stage, unsure whether to interrupt or stay silent. The truth doesn't ask permission. It just keeps moving. I was 6 years old the first time. I continued. My voice sounded calmer than I expected. Almost steady. I remember the kitchen floor was cold against my cheek after he knocked me down. Images began forming in people's minds. You could see it in their faces. The transformation from celebration to unease. Behind me, the slideshow screen had gone dark. For a moment, the giant blank surface seemed like a silent witness to everything being said. I didn't come here tonight to destroy my father. I said, I came here because the truth deserves the same stage the lies have been standing on. I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket. Immediately, my father stood up. Daniel, he said sharply. The tone cut through the hall like a knife. That voice used to control my entire world. But tonight, it didn't carry the same power. I pulled out a thick folder. The kind lawyers used. Inside were documents I'd spent years collecting. Medical reports, photographs, therapy. Records, police complaints that mysteriously disappeared before they were ever investigated. For 18 years, I said quietly, I documented everything. I turned toward the projector operator standing near the side of the stage. Please. He hesitated, looked at the mayor. The mayor slowly nodded. The first image appeared on the giant screen. A photograph of a small boy with a purple bruise across his cheek. The date was stamped in the corner. Age 7. A wave of shocked whispers rolled through the audience. The second image appeared. Hospital report describing 2 cracked ribs. Age 12. Then another. A photograph of stitches above my eyebrow. Age 15. Each image carried a date. Medical signature. Proof. Truth. People in the audience leaned forward in their chairs. Some looked horrified. Others looked confused, as if their brains were struggling to reconcile the man they admired with the images on the screen. My father's face had turned pale. For the first time in my entire life. He looked afraid. Daniel, stop this right now. He said. His voice wasn't loud anymore. It was desperate. But it was too late. Truth had already entered the room. And once truth arrives, it refuses to leave quietly. I turned back to the audience. People always ask why victims stay silent. My eyes moved slowly across the crowd. Why didn't they tell someone? Why didn't they speak up? I paused. Then said the question that had haunted me my entire childhood. But the real question is, why does everyone else stay silent too? My eyes drifted to the back of the hall, where my mother stood. Tears streamed down her face now. Her shoulders shook as she tried to cover her mouth with her hands. She knew. I said softly. The room felt even heavier. Not just because of what I'd revealed, but because people suddenly realized this story was bigger than one man. It was about silence. About fear. About the thousands of moments when someone could have stepped in. And DIDN single quotes T. My father began walking toward the stage. Anger was returning to his face. The mask of control was cracking. Enough, he shouted. But before he reached the steps, 2 uniformed officers moved in front of him. Instinct. Training. They had heard enough to know something was wrong. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The hero of the night, being restrained by the very system that once protected him. I closed the folder in my hands. The loud snap echoed through the microphone. For 18 years, I thought the world would never believe me, I said. Because who would question a hero? I looked down at my father. But heroes don't terrorize children. Then I stepped away from the podium. For 5 long seconds. No one moved. No one spoke. The silence felt almost physical, like the room itself was holding its breath. Then something unexpected happened. A woman near the back of the hall stood up. Slowly. Deliberately. She started clapping. The sound echoed sharply in the stunned silence. 1. Clap. 2. 3. A man beside her joined. Then another person. Then another. Soon dozens of people were standing. Clapping. Not for the ceremony. Not for my father. For the truth. My father stared at the crowd in disbelief. The admiration he had lived on for decades was dissolving right in front of him. Security escorted him out of the building. Soon after, he didn't fight. He didn't speak. He just walked. A hero leaving the stage without applause. The ceremony ended early that night. The award was quietly withdrawn 2 weeks later. An internal investigation began soon after, but none of that mattered as much as the moment that happened outside the building. I was standing alone near the parking lot when I heard footsteps behind me. Slow. Hesitant. I already knew who it was. My mother stopped a few feet away. She looked smaller than I remembered. Fragile. Like the weight of everything she had ignored for years had finally settled onto her shoulders. I'm sorry. She whispered. 2 words. 18 years too late. The night air was cold. Streetlights hummed softly above us. Cars drove past in the distance. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she asked the question that had probably been haunting her since. The ceremony began. Why didn't you tell anyone sooner? Her voice cracked halfway through the sentence. I turned to face. Her. Really looked at her. The woman who had held ice packs to my bruises. The woman who had whispered excuses while the damage kept happening, and for the first time in my life, I told her the truth she had been avoiding. Because the one person who was supposed to stop him, my voice caught slightly, was standing right there every time. Her face collapsed. The guilt hit harder than anything my father had ever done. She covered her mouth and began crying harder. But for the first time in my life, I didn't feel angry. Not really. The anger had burned itself out. Years ago. All that remained was clarity. I spent years thinking I was weak, I said quietly. But I wasn't weak. I looked up at the night sky. I was just a kid. My mother nodded through her tears. She didn't try to defend herself anymore, didn't try to explain, because some things can't be explained. After a few minutes, she whispered one more question. Do you hate me? I thought about it. About the years of silence, about the nights she said nothing, about the mornings she pretended everything was normal. Then I answered honestly, no. She looked surprised. I don't hate you, I said, but I can't pretend it didn't happen either. For the first time that night, she nodded in understanding. We stood there quietly for a while longer. Too. People connected by the same past, but finally facing it. Eventually she walked away toward the parking lot, and I walked toward the street. For 18 years, silence had raised me, but tonight, truth had finally set me free. And the strange thing about monsters, once the lights turn on, they never look powerful again.